my birthday's coming up in November, and the Georgia Renaissance Fair is also coming up in November. So I've convinced all of my friends to go to the Georgia Renaissance Fair with me, and we're gonna do a Mari's Royal Court Day. And so because of that, I gotta make a new outfit. So let's see if I can finish it in enough time. It's an Italian Renaissance style dress with a corset and a skirt and an undershirt and an overgown, and I've never made it before. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have to build it all from scratch. So I've already put some of the shirt together. I gotta serge all the seams and then finish making that, and then I'm kind of working from the inside out. So once I get the shirt done, then it is time for the dress. So hang out with me, I guess, as I do it. Let's see if I can get it done. So the pattern I'm using is from Rabbit and Hat Sewing Patterns, which can be found on Etsy, but also online on their website, which is just rabbitandhatpatterns.com. It's a really great website. I followed along not only with her pattern, but she also had YouTube videos available. And the pattern that I am using is the Italian Renaissance Tudor one. And so by the time this video really got started and I started taking everything, I had already cut out majority of the patterns and put the shirt together. So I'm kind of working from the inside out. And so the shirt is one of the base layers. And so it basically tells you to cut it all out, piece it together, and then serge all of the seams together. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm just kind of cutting off some of the excess. As you can see, my serging is not perfect. It does get better from time to time, but I am just serging all of the seams together and then cutting off the excess so that I don't have to worry about that later. While you serge, it's always, so you'll see me a couple of different times pulling out the threads because you're supposed to leave a tail on everything. Right then and there, I was kind of showing you how the threading works. And so it's pretty simple to thread a brother's serger. I still use a video to kind of walk me through it since it is 4 layers. But it's just good to be cautious. But yeah, so I really enjoy my serger. This is the first time I ever fully serged everything from hems to seams to everything. And I did think it looked really nice. Makes kind of everything look very complete. So eventually, once you serge all of the seams together, it actually asks you to serge the top and the bottom so that you can then create a channel for the elastic. And so you'll see that I'm doing that here. And so it just asks you to serge the entire top and the entire bottom. So moving on to, like I said, making those channels for the elastic. And so you'll see me kind of doing that throughout this video of taking the top of it and making those elastic channels, which was just like 1 to 2 centimeters folded over. And then as you can see, I'm pinning it along the way so I can just kind of keep that tension so that I know how much I need to stitch. And then you'll slide your elastic in there later on. So you leave about 1 inch of a gap, maybe smaller, depending on how good you are. I think I ended up leaving about 1 inch. So you can slide that elastic through it at the very end, and then it's all good. So just kind of keeping the tension as I'm going. My lines are definitely not straight, and it's definitely not overly perfect because sometimes it's 1 inch, sometimes it's less than 1 inch, sometimes it's more than 1 inch because I don't cut things perfectly, but that's okay. if you're new to sewing like I am, do your best and continue to just keep practicing and things will get better. I think I was more focused on trying to keep a straight line rather than I was trying to make sure that everything was even. And if you cut your pattern slightly uneven, that will also add to like some areas being a little longer and some areas being a little bit shorter. When I serged this as well, it also kind of had that where it got cut off maybe a little too much. And so I was working with all of that as well. So this is what the shirt fully looks like. As you can see, I've got that top elastic channel done, and I've got those shoulder seams serged together. Now the pattern was asking me to pin the bottom of the sleeves together and also the side of the bodice shirt together. And so I'm doing just that, where I'm pinning everything together and then going to just single stitch it together and then serge it again. Definitely not how I've built shirts in the past, like bosses in the past. So this was definitely a new technique, but I will say it did make it easier. And I think it added to the like flowiness of the shirt because it wasn't overly rigid in the seams. Here's my sewing buddy Beans. She was there throughout the whole process. So I am mostly done with the shirt. I've serged all the edges. I've serged and hemmed the skirt or the bottom of the shirt. And so now what's left is the sleeves. So I've got those folded and pinned because you have to create an elastic channel because it'll have a little ruffle at the front of the sleeve. So I've got to do 2 channels here. And then I think all that's left is just putting all of the elastic in, and then I think I'm done with the shirt, and then I can start on the bodice and the skirt, which I'm hoping relatively easier. But we'll see. Here she is. And not even really half of her glory, but the whole top is now finished, and it's got really cute sleeves with the ruffles and all the elastic sewn in now, and I add a little bow, and it's fully done. The corset, I didn't film any of the corset making process because I was lazy, but it is done, and it's triple lined. So it has a middle piece, and then obviously the fashion and the lining, and an interlining. I followed the pattern as well as I could, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense on how it was asking me to do boning on this. So I did the boning the way I wanted to do it because that was easy. And yeah, so that meant I just ended up sewing the boning in on the inside, which is not kind of how I wanted it. I would have liked to try and figure out how to make it on the inside, but it was too complicated and I didn't have the brain energy. So I just did it like that, so I can see it. And I guess if I ever wanted to take the boning out, I won't have to deconstruct the entire garment to do it. But now it is boned on the side pieces, but not boned in the middle. And my goal here is to use, because the original pattern calls for boning in the middle, like a bunch of them, but I want to try using busks. So busks are wood slats that go into the corset, and so when you're wearing it like this, you're wearing it this, when you're wearing it, instead of having channels here for boning, which you can see, like obviously you get your over stitching on, and I didn't really want that, so I wanted to keep this open because I'm thinking about maybe in the future, because I definitely won't have time now, I may want to add an embellishment to the front because I think it would be really pretty. So instead I want to use a busk because that'll give me the illusion of the like taut, really flat stomach piece. It'll also give me some push here, so everything will sit really lifted and nicely. But then yeah, as you see, I haven't done any of my holes for the corset, but that's okay. I have to poke those holes and do that, which will be fun because it'll be the first time I get to use my grommet press. Grommets, that's the word. But I did it a little differently than what it said. I think it wanted me to put two boning sections like right next to each other, so then you would start your grommets here, but I didn't feel like that was gonna work, and I'm obviously not the professional, but based on what I had and what I was doing, it didn't look like it worked. So instead I kind of spaced them out so that I could put the grommets in between the two pieces of boning to hopefully add some more structure. Plus I think it really, the reason why they wanted me to do that was to add a lot of structure towards the end so that it's not flimsy when you pull them together tight. But I think because I'm using a pretty thick duck fabric as my lining and a pretty thick linen, I think it's gonna be thick enough without it, and I think it'll be pretty sturdy. Beans says she thinks it'll be okay too. So what I'm gonna do now is take my embellishment and sew my embellishment across the top, so that I can secure it and get it all said and done, and then I'll have to wait until Justin can help me with the grommets because he's a little bit more precise than I am. But then we'll do the grommets and I'll start working on the skirt, which shouldn't be too hard, but I'll figure out how many pieces it's gonna take. So yeah.
So I'm awful and completely forgot to film anything regarding the skirt. So what you're seeing here is kind of the process of me cutting out the patterns for the overcoat, which is made up of a top and a skirt that eventually get attached together. So all of these are the pattern pieces. I've got a couple that are cut on fold, like that one there. The skirt piece and the belt piece were also cut on fold. That is my white fabric from Fabric Depot. It is a woven fabric that is a jacquard, white lily, and gold pattern. I'm showing you kind of the right side and the wrong side if you're familiar with that. Right side of a fabric is the fabric that is facing out, and wrong side of a fabric is the one facing in. As I'm kind of trying to figure out how much fabric I actually ordered and what the likelihood of me fitting all of this on is, you're kind of seeing that process. So it's me measuring out poorly what I need to do to kind of piece all of these pieces together to make sure that I have enough fabric to cut out 4 full pieces of the skirt fabric on the fold. So I'm kind of just puzzle piecing that all together. I ended up being able to fit it all into at least a yard, and then I ended up pinning it together. So those 2 red pieces that I kind of showed off at the beginning are the lining pieces for the overcoat. They are made out of the fashion fabric for the bodice and the skirt, which were natural 100% Yorkshire linen from Fabric Wholesale Direct. The bodice also had a duck canvas from Fabric Wholesale Direct in there as well. But I ended up using those as the lining pieces to the overcoat so that it would all kind of match and look cohesive together. So still pinning, making sure things are right, and then I'll get cutting, which is by far my least favorite part. I can sew and pin stuff all day long, but cutting it out, I am just not steady-handed enough to cut things evenly, so I'm doing my best, but I do get nervous when cutting really fancy fabric. That was the first time using my Famore scissors. So on to the next part where I, like I said, struggle to cut out really nice fabric. So I had to call in some reinforcements with Justin so that he, with his precision cutting, can cut out my really nice fabric pieces so that things can be super even as I'm putting it all together and that things aren't too mismatched. He's also using Famore scissors, by the way, but they're the left-handed ones that they specifically make. And I'm just sitting there doodling around, not doing much, but just keeping beans out of the way because she likes to get in the way. He truly has the precision of a master when he cuts things out. He focuses so hard on making sure that it's super right. With these two, you can see that he is cutting out pieces on the fold and not on the fold, and so that detachable sleeve right there was not cut on a fold, so there ended up being two mirror images of each other cut out, and then the belt piece that he's cutting out now is cut on the fold, so he just goes right through the end so that he can figure that out. And so that belt piece now has doubled in size because you can unfold it, and then he's doing the same thing with the cut not on a fold but cut two pieces of the bodice for the jacket and then a cut on the fold for the back of the jacket. That rotary tool also that I just had in my hand is also a Famore tool. Love them, they're amazing. They have such amazing cutlery when it comes to any sort of scissors or rotary tool, and so I'm always very impressed with how well their items cut. And you can always send your stuff back in to get resharpened as well, which is nice. Now we're getting started on cutting out those skirt pieces. So as you can see, we have to cut on fold. So we're figuring out the best way to do that. And I said we can cut it and then just pull it up and then cut it and then pull it up. And so we're kind of just figuring out the way to do it. We ended up figuring out how long it was and then kind of going from there. We ended up stacking it all on top because you're like, oh, maybe we could just cut it all out once. And then that seemed like a bad idea. So we didn't do that. But we did find out kind of how many pieces of the right length we had. So we ended up not pinning it down because it didn't need to be, so we're just using kind of any random thing that we had to kind of be a pattern weight. Cutting those pieces out again. Again, he's super precise with it all, which ended up making my job so much easier once I got it all cut out. So again, I forgot to film a good portion of this in the next day. So I have already finished by this time the over gowns top, which had to have a dart put in the front and or the fashion fabrics and the lining fabrics, and then stitched together and then flipped inside out. It was a little bit more complicated, so I wish I had filmed that part, but I ended up not. It was so complicated that it kind of took all my brain power. I also at that point had stitched together all 4 of the skirt panel pieces and serged them as well so that they wouldn't fray. This woven fabric that I have is very fray capable, so I'm just trying to keep it from, you know, unraveling or things getting pulled. You are going to see a lot of pleating and unpleating and pleating. I've never done pleats before for anything, so I'm not very familiar with it. And the pattern did not specify what kind of pleat to use, just that you needed to pleat the entire skirt so that the waist was the same length as the bodice bottom, because you were going to end up stitching them together. Very similar to how a lot of times a pattern will call for you to do a really long stitch and then gather fabric so that I can do that. But instead of gathering, you use pleats, which looks really pretty, but I did it really poorly and it's not even and accurate because I could not figure out how to do it even inaccurately because I've never done it before. So I did my best. I ended up using, I think I said box pleats, which is just to have an inch and then about less than an inch underneath it. It's what is usually used in like schoolgirl uniform pleats. You see it a lot in skirts. But I thought that that would fit well with the style of Italian Renaissance rather than a knife pleat, which is very similar to like an accordion pleat, where you just kind of fold it all in one direction. And so I didn't want that. I wanted it to kind of lay flat. So I have an inch of it on top and then 2 pieces underneath. Very long process of pleating. The skirt was very long, so you'll see this for a little longer. But yeah, this is really good, really fun. Glad I got to use some new techniques. Definitely unpleated and pleated all of that. I did end up basting this together, so that once the pleats were put in the position that I wanted them, I could just base stitch it, which is to basically make a single stitch line all the way through towards the top in a very wide stitch so that it's easier to remove later, so that it just kind of holds together while you sew the rest of it, but you can take your pins out. I do that a lot for things where I have to gather something, or if it just is going to be simpler to, instead of using a bunch of pins when I'm trying to place it all together, to just base stitch it and then remove the base stitching later. I bet you, the viewer watching this, definitely feels like I've just cycled the last 2 minutes of footage and I haven't done anything new, but I promise I was making progress, slowly but surely. I don't know if anybody else struggles while they're sewing to that grip strength in your hands and that muscle that is in like the meaty part of your thumb in the palm of your hand gets so cramped. And I was kind of dealing with that because I get that really bad when I sew. I need to invest in some compression gloves when I'm sewing so that I can keep my fingers pinched in the right format. Also, peep the fruit baskets sweatshirt. Isn't it so cute? I got it at Dragon Con, which was so fun. And I have another sweater that's Sailor Moon themed by that same artist. I wish I could remember what her name is. I'll put it in the description if I can find out what it is. One other fun fact, when I serged all of the pieces together, I also rolled a small hem on the ends of both fabrics so that there was like a clean edge. So once I had everything pleated, I started trying to match up the bottom of the bodice to the top of the skirt. So as you can see, I'm just kind of putting those together and then going to start sewing them. So here is me sitting down to put those together and really make sure that everything is even and matches well. Definitely hard to do this with this much fabric. I am very proud of my basic Brother machine, which is a CP 100X or CPX 100. It is for sewing and quilting, but it did the best it could do. It only broke one needle throughout this entire project, which is a blessing, and I am super proud. I did also break a needle on my serger, but it has been a while since I replaced that needle, so that one makes sense. So I have got those fashion fabrics put together, and now you flip over the lining and then kind of fold underneath it the rough edge about 1 centimeter so that you get this nice clean hem, and then you stitch it all together and you hide the seamed together pieces. And it's very similar on how you would make a dress that has a lining. As you can see, I'm just cutting off lots and lots of spare pieces, have that fabric folded over, and then now I am going through and making sure I have that edge nice and clean as I stitch the lining to the fashion fabric. Probably should have flipped this the other way so that the shorter side was feeding through the smaller part of the machine, but I was not smart enough to think about that when I did it. Still cleaning up a lot of those fabric lines, anything that's fraying, going through that and then pulling stuff through. I was kind of pushing the fabric through my machine because it definitely didn't catch as well as it could have, but it did well for this type of project, which it is not necessarily meant for these types of fabrics, which any machine I'm sure can sew any fabric, but I was really hoping to use my new sewing machine that I had ordered for this project, but it has not arrived yet, but I'm still excited for it. So this is the hopefully last project I will use on this Brother, but it has lasted me well. It's a very good beginner sewing machine. So here I am seam ripping edges that were sewn together a little too far, and so I had stitched things unevenly, and so I'm kind of unstitching those and then going to fix where the hole is. So it's unstitched now. I'm going to fix it so that there is not a hole. And as you see, I learned my lesson and decided to do it with the short end facing the back end of my fabric. I kind of lost some tension on my thread at the top, so kind of fixing that there as well. And then trimming up all of my strings. So here we are at the end of the video with me kind of showing you the final product. It's not fully finished in this video yet, but I don't have any footage of the full product. So that is the skirt, the blouse, the corset, and the overcoat all finished. And then what I had left to do after this was finish the belt. That kind of gives you an idea of what that looked like in full. So I'm not fixing things for you, but I hope you enjoyed this. Thought it was fun. And to see the full reveal, stay tuned for the Red Fair video. Till next time, Stardust.